Everything I do during this, I'm coordinating with White House counsel. There will be no difference between the president's position and our position as to how to handle this to the extent that we can. Well, exactly how we go forward, I'm going to coordinate with the president's lawyers. So there won't be any difference between us on how to do this. I'm going to take my cues from the president's lawyers.
Majority Leader Mitch McConnell gearing up for the Senate impeachment trial, which we are expecting to see in January. Now, the Judiciary Committee, they approved the articles of impeachment today, and a full House vote expected in the middle of next week, likely on Wednesday. After that, Congress will go on recess for the holidays. Now, when they return in the new year, impeachment, it will be in the Senate's hands. Here to discuss what will happen there, or best guesses, Dean at Georgetown Law, William Treanor. Dean, first of all, thank you for the time. I've imagined that not just talking heads like myself, but both students and even faculty must be trying to get your sense as to what happens when this inevitably goes to trial in the Senate. And I guess the clear answer is we're not sure, right? I mean, a lot of discretion is going to be with Senator McConnell, but he can go in a bunch of different directions, can't he?
There's a lot of discretion, and the Constitution doesn't give a lot of guidance. It says that the House impeaches, and it says that the Senate has the power to try, and that the Chief Justice presides over the trial. And that's really all the Constitution says. So the Majority Leader has a great deal of power in deciding exactly how the trial takes place.
To that end, at least from some of the reporting, there is a lot of different wants as to what this trial could hold. From the president's side, reportedly, there's a circus atmosphere he wouldn't mind from witness lists, including both father and son Biden, Pelosi, Schiff, etc. And from the Democrat side, a lot of the witnesses they've wanted to hear from the president's inner circle and others, John Bolton, etc., they'd love to have testify. Senator McConnell reportedly wants to have this trial over and done with as soon as possible, possibly even having no witnesses. The magic number is 51 that he will need. The question is, how many of all Republicans would go along with the plan? Let's say hypothetically, Professor, that a handful of Republicans say, no, we need to hear from some people. A compromise would then need to be worked out with McConnell and Schumer. What kind of a compromise could it look like?
Well, it really could look like anything. And again, the Constitution is pretty open-ended, and so you could have the full range. If 51 senators decide that they want a full trial, that's what you'd have. If they wanted it to be just based on the record from the House, it could be that. A compromise, might be somewhere in between. It might be a limited number of witnesses, and it might be focused in just on, the Ukrainian, the charges with respect to the Ukraine.
What kind of discretion could Justice Roberts have here? I know people point to the past, and, for a large part, Justice Rehnquist was there, but he certainly didn't compel witnesses to testify, etc. He basically called balls and strikes and left it at that. Is that what we should assume Roberts, in all likelihood, will assume here, be seen but not heard?
Well, it really is the Chief Justice's call. The major thing to recognize is that at the end of the day, the Senate is both judge and jury. So they're the ones who are going to be making the decisions. The role of the Chief Justice under the Constitution is to preside. What that might mean, and presumably will mean, is that he will make rulings. But the rulings can be overturned by the Senate, because again, they're the decision makers. So my assumption is that he is, not going to drive what the trial looks like. But at the end of the day, it's really a majority of the Senate that determines what shape it takes.
You were discussing a moment ago about Justice Roberts. He's spoken openly about a concern about the Supreme Court being viewed in a political prism, that it is not apolitical, and he's concerned about how it's viewed, certainly in the aftermath of Bush v. Gore. If he wanted to diminish some of those concerns about the court, what kind of things could he do that might, for some say, well, the Supreme Court here should not be viewed in that partisan light?
I mean, I think that my guess is that what he will do is, focus in on evidentiary rulings. I think that when he makes the rulings, he will be very attentive to trying to be neutral. That's very important to him. Going back to his Senate confirmation hearings, when he talked about the role of the Supreme Court justice as being like an umpire. His rulings can be overturned by the Senate, but based on what he's done on the court, I think he will try to be kind of neutral in his decision making.
And finally, from many folks who endured some of the testimony that we heard throughout the Justice Committee hearings, there were lawmakers saying outright that there was no justification and nothing in the Constitution that, from both obstruction of justice or abuse of power, that ever would have risen to the level of a high crime and a misdemeanor. That part is an opinion. It's clear in writing, and the Founding Fathers even articulated concerns over foreign involvement in our elections, in our democracy. That part isn't really up for debate, is it?
Well, I think, if you go back to what the founders said during the debates at the Philadelphia Convention, one of their major concerns was interference from foreign leaders with the electoral process. Governor Morris, who was actually the person who spoke at the convention, the often is very explicit on that. That's one kind of major theme that we have from the founders. The other is something that Hamilton was very focused on, which is that this is really about abuse of office. So high crimes and misdemeanors, as Hamilton defined it in the Federalist Papers, is about abuse of office.
And when the president and his legal team recently argued that Article 2 basically gave the president unchecked power and that he was very explicitly, in his words, above the law, using that Fifth Avenue example, as a student of history here, I would imagine the Founding Fathers would be flipping over if they heard any sitting president saying that basically there were no checks and balances for the executive branch.
Well, for the founders, the core idea was that the impeachment clause would be about protecting against abuse of office. And even the people who were in favor of a strong president saw impeachment as a crucial check for that reason.
Dean William Treanor, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, when we come back, we will leave Washington and we'll head to, of all places, Kentucky. The outgoing governor decided to leave a not-so-pleasant surprise, pardoning hundreds of people, including murderers and rapists. We'll tell you the shocking story right after this.